I'm Supermoon Tarot, and in today's video, we are talking about being in the flow. Who's we, you might ask? Oh, just me and my beloved co-host Mon Mon. Say hello, Mon Mon. I love Mon Mon so much, if I have not made that abundantly clear. Being in the flow, though, let's stay on topic. I am so happy to say that my spirit guide, one of my spirit guides, gave me a ton of practical and detailed information and application. But before we get into that, let's discuss the concept of being in the flow. It can be hard to define, but that's the whole aim for this entire Spiritual Talks video. One of many that I put on a playlist you should totally check out, because this topic, as well as others, are non-physical and concepts that are so big, simple, yet complicated that the definition of them can get lost, and then it's hard to bring that into the physical where you can actually make concrete steps to move forward. So consider this an olive branch of practicality. That's the best way I want to put it. Being in the flow often is this, you're going to work, time seems to move quickly. Every time you could have gotten a bad customer or client, they seem to be passed off somewhere else or go away. Suddenly you get an impromptu call from a crush or invitation to go out with friends. Even watching like Netflix and eating a snack is so much more fun and meaningful than doing the same activity on another day when you're not in the flow. When you're not in the flow, it doesn't mean you automatically don't feel good. You can be totally content. It's just, I would say being in the flow involves effortless certainty in both yourself, the world, and even if you're in the process of understanding who you are, as you make decisions, they feel more concrete and you really feel connected to the authenticity that you were successfully able to display. Often this is when things just seem to work out for people. People describe things just moving with such speed and lining up perfectly. Now here's the thing that's really interesting about flow in general. It always, and this is what I was asking my spirit guide, I said, oh, does it involve synchronicities? Because they mentioned there's different kinds of flow. Yes, there's different kinds of flow. And in those different kinds of flow, I said, is there synchronicity in just one kind? And they said, no, all of them. But synchronicity in this case, we need to redefine it. People usually describe synchronicity as blanketly big, significant coincidences that are connected to meaningful life choices. But we're talking about the smaller synchronicities, the kind where you mention something and then right after you mention it, you see it or there's mention of it in the world around you. And this just kind of keeps happening one after another. It's like talking about, again, a favorite snack and then randomly seeing an empty bag of it in a parking lot and you're like, whoa, I just mentioned that. Or you're talking about a topic with a friend. That's another perfect example when you're in the flow and you're just perfectly having one great discussional point after the other. There's no self-consciousness. You're just sharing one after the other. This is why people often have like best friends and then like to keep having these conversations. You want to like be in that flow subconsciously. You get what I'm saying here? But these small synchronicities that you are experiencing are proof that you are instantly manifesting. And when you're in the flow, it's just so much easier because manifesting, especially on the internet, can be such a analytical thing. People think they have to control it and it becomes so focused and you're so not present that it defies the actual process of manifestation. So this is a way that manifestation is sort of like a byproduct and an example that you are in the flow. So you get the benefits of being in the flow and other benefits. You get what I'm saying here? So different kinds of flow. Yes, there are. There are 4 different kinds of flow. And we're going to talk about those different kinds and what that entails and the things you have to do in order to be in that kind of flow. And then we're going to discuss 4 different kind of mindsets that match up. So you can be like, oh, this is what I'm going through, then I'm going to tailor it to whatever is the right flow for me. You get what I'm saying here? So first flow, passive flow. This is actually the one that is the most commonly, like, people advise others to be in this process. Often this is when people just sort of blanketly use the term of, oh, being in the flow, you just turn off your brain, you're not thinking, and you're just super present. Very Taoist, if I'm thinking correctly and using the correct term, which is great, but that is just passive flow. And again, you might not need that particular flow. You might need another one. So passive flow is driven by making decisions, again, in the moment. All of these involve being in the moment and being present. So you're not contemplating what you're going to do next. You're just constantly here. And you're not worried about what happened in the past or what that means. You're constantly here. And you're making choices based on inspired emotions and desires. So this would be like just sitting here right now and asking yourself genuinely, without, again, you turning off your brain. You're not thinking too deeply, analytically about it. You're not being self-conscious. You're sort of turning that part of your brain off. And you're just saying to yourself, what do I want to do right now? And despite routine and logic, you fulfill it. We're not talking on an extreme note. I want to put that out there right now. We're not talking on an extreme note. We're talking in realistic terms. So don't do something not okay for society or others if there's inspiration. I want to be absolutely clear about that. We're talking about the idea that it's late at night and you're just like, oh, I feel inspired to call my friend. I'm going to see if they're up right now. And you just do that. And before you know it, you maybe you were going through a tough time and the both of you weren't sharing with the other that you were both going through a similar situation. Before you know it, you're closer than can be and you got some healing done. And then before you know it, you stayed up so late, you're going out to breakfast. And then when you were out to breakfast, you met the love of your life. And it's just one thing after the other. But the important thing with this is not only choices made out of inspiration and asking yourself, what do I want to do? But it's also about checking in with yourself when the initial choice you made isn't fun anymore. Like, let's say you start off with a good intention. You're like, you know what? I want to draw. I'm going to go draw. I'm going to make a little drawing. It's fun. I've never done it before. I'm going to have a good time. And then you're doing it and even 10 minutes go by and you're like, I am not into this. This is not my thing. I was wrong about it. Don't keep forcing it until it is fun. This would be the type of flow where you go, oh, I guess I'm ready for the next thing. Now, unbeknownst to you, all of the decisions you're making, you're sort of getting out of the way and letting the universe work itself out. So when you're making a decision and you're deciding to do something and it didn't work out after 10 minutes and you figured that out, little do you know, you could have been subconsciously forcing yourself to sort of pause so something that wasn't fun and a part of your flow would pass by, and it sort of like was holding you off long enough for that to pass by. And so then when you made your next decision and then you were inspired to do something else, it all perfectly worked out. So it's almost like you're not consciously aware of it, but you just exactly know the next thing to do, and your inner compass is driven off of that connection through your emotions. Wow, I explained that so well. I was like thinking about all these things before I'm filming it, and now I'm like, wow, that's exactly how I want to put it. Engaged flow. Engaged flow is when inspiration is just too below the surface. Not all of us are deeply connected to our emotions and even can kind of feel detached. Where you say, what do I want to do? And just it's kind of like an aloof or apathetic approach. So you're just like, I don't know. I'm just like, nothing's really doing it for me, so to speak. Engaged flow is when you sort of are going to pick on the last desire and inspiration you had, often long held. This would be a good time to connect to things that you wanted to do in your childhood. This is often when people talk about the concept of doing something fun like that. And you're going to kind of just use that as a sense of momentum of pushing you forward. This is where it gets sort of complicated, and complicated because you can easily get in your own way. I don't want to put out that momentum. For some, this is an opportunity to overthink the situation. Because on one hand, in passive flow, we talked about how don't force it. If you feel you're not into it anymore, don't do it anymore. Engaged flow is a little more forced. You're going to kind of have to be like, I guess I'm going to go do this thing. And then you might need to push yourself to do it a little bit before sort of you're kind of getting that sort of flow going. But on the other hand, you're still going to want to check in with yourself every now and then again and say, am I having fun? Is this for me? It's sort of like a trial and error, of passive flow. It's much more conscious, and you want to be aware of being judgmental to yourself if you just don't feel emotional and can't connect to your emotions. You have to be able to, during engaged flow, to be like, okay, I tried this, it's just not for me, got it, I will try to figure out another thing that I used to always want to do, and I'll try that out next. And not just be too hard on yourself when it happens. You're going to eventually be able to connect to your emotions, you're going to eventually bring this out, but you have to start somewhere. So this is less driven on current inspiration and emotions, but kind of like, what was the last thing you wanted when you did feel connected to that? And don't say, oh, I've never wanted to do anything. Be really contemplative and meditative maybe to start this. Before you jump into this, really think in your head. It could be as simple as the color pink. Go do something involved with the color pink. But it's much more conscious, and you're not turning off your brain as hard as in the passive flow. Just double checking. Yeah. Yes. Okay, cool. So then, just looking over my notes, making sure I said everything correctly. Then this is academic flow. This one is a super self-aware flow. I want to be clear here. Every part of being in the flow is you have to build an ability to be honest with yourself and build an ability to be self-aware. Sometimes and this is no fault to anyone, like you're in your journey of understanding yourself in the world. Some people don't know when they're coming off a certain way. And you have to, during the process of flow, be like, am I having fun, or am I really trying to make this happen and force it? Academic flow is like self-awareness on a whole different level. It is extremely metaphorical. What I mean by metaphor, and could be more detailed oriented and explained more, is in my spiritual upgrades video. I can make a whole nother video when I talk about spiritual metaphors, because they are literally like the predominant thing in life and how spirit guides like to speak and everything. So I can totally make a separate video on that. But when we talk about academic flow and we talk about spiritual metaphors, it is about being able to say, okay, self-awareness time. How do I feel? How do I feel like I'm feeling? What do I want when I say, like when we talk about inspiration and desires? And it's not simply the idea of saying, I want to have something silly happen. I'm going to do something silly. That would be sort of passive flow. Sometimes it's abstract and existential ideas like, oh, I'm just feeling so caged in. So I need something that involves a feeling of freedom and outward perspective. You see what I'm saying here? It's not just simplistically defined as happy, sad. These would be you'd be very aware of how you're interacting with the world and how the world interacts with you. And then this is what I mean by when I say spiritual metaphor. You'd have to be like, okay, well, when I do an activity where maybe, I can't think of the name, but it's when you like put on a parachute and someone like drags you along on the boat and you feel very free and up in the air, that would be your brain going, that makes me feel very free and expansive. So there is my spiritual metaphor I'm going to physically be a part of to enact my desire. Now, when you are performing these spiritual metaphors, you're either saying, I feel this way, and then you're going to make choices that will mirror that action, that sort of feeling or inspiration. You're going to either find something that is, what did I put here? That you want to feel, so maybe you're not feeling a certain way and you're saying, this is how I'd like to feel, so you're going to put yourself in that physical spiritual metaphor. Or you're going to say, this is how I'm being, and I'm going to do the opposite to sort of get me out of my shell or whatever be the circumstance or situation. So example, let's say you're pushing and playing TV, or you're scrolling something on your phone, and you're aware, you know what, when I scroll on my phone so continuously, I'm not really engaging. I'm constantly in a search for the next thing. So I need to do something that involves a more slower, focused, and analytical approach. This would be a good time to have fun going into Wikipedia about something, or a book, but like, let's be real, most of us like go on Wikipedia, and you look into it, and you just have fun diving really deep into a topic. There's your spiritual metaphor, you're aware needs to happen, and the embodiment, the spiritual metaphor it's embodying, and this is you participating in it. And again, it's that constant checking in with yourself. Is this what I want to be doing now? But you're making decisions through the academic flow mindset. So woot! Okay, I said that perfectly. Number 4, brutal flow. Yeah, you heard me correctly. This is the wonderful thing when learning these topics. This was definitely one of those moments where like I stopped in my tracks and I was like, did I hear you correctly? I even tried to say, do you mean this? And they were like, no, no, no. So we're going to actually get into specifics as to why that unusual term is the one chosen to describe it. So this is the type of flow that is usually inspired by aggression or physical acts. And we're not talking about positive physical acts, if you get what I'm saying. I just saw Mon move. Mon gets what I'm saying. It is called brutal because instead of aggression flow, because it isn't always inspired by anger. And brutal is a way to describe something that's super direct and kind of like forceful. Now, the interesting thing about this type of flow is you're not going to watch this video and go out of your way to try to replicate. It's very hard to replicate this type of flow. And this is not the flow most people want to live in. It's not very comfortable. And it's short-lived. There's not really a way to keep it going consistently. You see what I'm saying here? But it is a flow that exists, and that's the whole point of these videos, is to give you the whole range of topics. So a good way to give you an example of this type of flow is that it would be like, let's say someone on a TV show did something like a bad deed, and they're quickly trying to cover it up or escape, to get away with it or whatever. And it just seems like they know when to jump and leap over the right obstacles and what to do next. And it sort of feels like they're turning off their brain and they're intuitively knowing what to do. But the inspiration as to why they're making their decisions, you get the inspiration. I don't want to say it's like, I guess it's like bad, but that would be too general of a topic to describe. My next example. Another example would be, let's say someone impromptu called you in to go to work and you weren't supposed to work that day. And you're quickly like getting yourself ready, or a friend is like, hey, do you want to go out? Oh, that person you like is here. You better get over here quick. And you're like, I gotta get ready. See how there's not anger involved, but it is a very intense act of emotions in the moment. You wouldn't realistically keep this sort of franticness going, but it is franticness that seems to involve a lot of like clear, like confident, intuitive choices. I would say out of all the flows, this is the one you really successfully turn off your brain and you're just like in the moment doing all these actions. Let's talk about the 4 different states of mind and which flows pair with which one. Before we get into that though, I want to be clear that you will notice it is not a coincidence which state of mind pairs with which flow. Sometimes it might even be difficult to make the transition, and there might be some training wheels needed, metaphorically here, before you can hop over. Good example of this is maybe you need to be able to turn off your mind, and that is just not a skill you have, and you need to practice meditation. That is okay. It's nothing to be embarrassed about, but the same thing that's going to help you move forward is the same thing that you're kind of missing. Do you see what I'm saying here? See the synchronicity, the spiritual meaning behind it all? I love it. It's beautiful. So understand that before you say, I just don't know how to do that, I'm done. Try to consider seeing what needs to happen in between before you can make that full leap, if that leap feels too far. Number 1, state of mind. This is anybody who's anxious, they feel off, they are overthinking with intense zealous. Because you can overthink in a much more calmer state of mind. This is like high energy type of overthinking. This is when you're indecisive, but again, with intense concern. Again, you could just relaxingly be like, I don't know, this looks good, I don't know. Or you could be like, if I don't make the right decision, my whole career's over. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can go to the next level. And in general, it's just an overly emotional place to be. It doesn't feel like you are able to chill out your emotions, and it's a very reactive time period. Well, the pairing for that state of mind would be passive flow. Coincidentally, or as we said, not coincidentally, turning off your mind, taking those emotions and using them to your benefit to more be channeled through inspiration rather than fear. You get what I'm saying? State of mind number 2, detached from emotions. Again, you're just aloof. It can be on an extreme level, and it can be more of a relaxed, just kind of like nothing's getting really you excited about life. You're not that upset about it. In fact, maybe you haven't cried in a while. You know what I mean? It's just, maybe you're not an overly emotional person to begin with. And so you're not super in touch with what you want to do, and you're not really that upset with it, but you'd like to know. This is also somebody who is struggling to commit to something. It just doesn't feel like you're that excited enough to keep wanting to stick to anything. And often involves people who are going through states of boredom, and tiredness can be an attribute of the situation. This is when you would want to pick engaged flow. This is when you are kind of just a little bit pushing yourself to keep sticking with something in order to make your way towards inspiration. Again, like we talked about with engaged flow, this would not be the type of, you don't want to keep forcing yourself forever, but you just push it long enough until you maybe see some inspiration come to the surface. This is definitely a journey of understanding of how to find your inspiration, but it doesn't have to be emotional driven. Yes, it can lead to you being more connected to your emotions, but you don't have to be. Like, you don't have to there's not, I know we always, in the spiritual community, it's often like empath. Some people are empaths and some people aren't. And that is okay. We're not all meant to be alike. So this is being able to navigate in a different kind of way to, yes, inspire something to the surface, find that inspiration. But I've seen many people who are in like engaged flow, and once they feel like they're a little more like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm feeling good, they're still not very deeply emotional people. They're more connected to it, but that's not going to be their ultimate end point, is what I want to say. So again, engaged flow, as we talked about. Number 3, these are for people who are either super self-aware or need to be self-aware. Again, if this is not an ability for you, it's just I highly recommend tarot. It will help put your situation in front of you more clearly and help you evaluate it in a different way. This is when people are like, I just don't know why things keep happening. I'm not even sure why. It doesn't solely mean, oh, well, it's because you're not a good person, this is why it's happening. Not at all. if you get into that sort of spiritual metaphor mindset that is the act of the academic flow, I don't know if I said that, academic flow goes with this state of mind. This would be a good time to understand, okay, when I do this, I realize I'm telling the world this, and the metaphor that's being reflected back to me is this type of person I keep over and over again. But you have to be willing to admit that you're doing something, that something is happening. Again, the ultimate goal isn't to define yourself as like not a great person. That's not usually the metaphor. Sometimes the metaphor is like you just are not comfortable committing. There's like a fear around it. You're afraid of getting hurt. That's not bad. That's just a thing. And you might attract into your life people who can't commit. So while you think you might be able to commit on a romantic level, you kind of just can't seem to commit in other ways. Do you see what I'm saying here? I'm giving sort of a metaphor. But this is a great way for spiritual growth. I also highly recommend this sort of, if you want to choose this flow, to gain spiritual clarity and evolution. The way my spirit guide described it is that this flow is great for, remember how we talked about in spiritual upgrades, you are, the way your functioning body works, one of the ways is you are controlled by your physical body, your mind body, and your spiritual body. They all work in tandem, but your spiritual body or mind, because there is also a physical mind, a mind, and a spiritual mind. Stick with me here. But the spiritual one is the one that's supposed to be the pilot, running everything in control. You get what I'm saying. The thing, though, is the reason why often our physical mind or physical body is the one that takes control, and then we don't know how we got here and so on and so forth, and people are trying to slowly make their way to the more spiritual mind and body when participating with things, is the spiritual mind and body is like a non-physical thing. But we have been deeply conditioned to experience things in a physical way. We want physical proof. We want tangibility. And so when you can see and touch these spiritual metaphors in front of you, and like your brain has this idea and then seeing it enacted in front of you and you're participating with it, this is a fantastic way for, on a deep level, to reconnect back to your spiritual mind through what you are familiar with, your physical body, and get back into it. Okay, so what do you do if you fulfill multiple state of minds? Not a big deal. Whatever you're in, you match with that flow in the moment, and then you beautifully flow from one to the next. So if you need to use all of them, well, technically the fourth one would be like more in the moment. That's fine. We'll say 3 of them. If you need to use all 3 of the types of flow throughout the day and keep bouncing around from one to the next, depending on what you're in, do that. That's fine. There's not a rule that you have to do just one. If you are bouncing around from different state of minds or perspectives on the world or feelings or no feelings. You get what I'm saying? Now here's where it gets really interesting. While we did go over that whole concept of matching the two and defining things, those are just starting off points. They are not forever ways you want to lead your flow and life by. These are going to get momentum going, and eventually you'll find your own flow, a flow that will be indescribable to others. Because here's where it gets really interesting when I was talking to my spirit guide. It does not mean you are out of flow to experience lower vibrational emotions. A good example would be, let's say you're just sad, you don't feel good about yourself, or it's a sort of indescribable type of heaviness where you can't quite define what it is. When you're in the flow, you would sit there and be like, I feel down. Okay. Let me journal about this one moment. Now the next I'm gonna go just kind of chill out and just meditate in nature. And then the next you're just kind of non-judgmentally being like, you know what? I don't feel great, but I do feel inspired to just kind of sit and watch some TV, whatever. It's still this sense of following something not sticking in the past, being present. It's a sense of momentum, asking questions, evolution. But the reason why this idea isn't encompassed in the other 4 kinds of flow we talked about is if you're not in a sort of certain state of mind of self-awareness and feel like you have a better control of how you interact and do a certain amount of healing, when it pops up, you're only going to approach it from a state of mind of getting stuck in it, judging yourself for it. You're just not at a point, so you're sort of kind of taking a break from that to discover other parts of yourself. But just because you're going through your life and you experience something that's maybe not the most comfortable emotion or situation doesn't mean you're still not in the flow and that difficult circumstance isn't positively building through something. You'll notice that a lot in tarot where like you might be like, I have not been feeling great, and then you'll still get the star card, which if you're not familiar with tarot implies destiny. You're on the right path. Because not all things have to be happy for it to be valid. You see what I'm saying here? So I just want you to understand that you are ultimately building towards a flow of your own. The concept of flow in general, though, was beautifully defined by my spirit guide when they talked about it being described as trusted focus. Your goal is to bring your attention to the moment, but not turn off your brain and not think about anything ever. It's about sometimes you're not thinking because that's what needed in order to give you space to free up the mind and dig deeper into the subconscious. Sometimes you're thinking a lot and you're really analyzing yourself, the world, how you relate to it. It's focus. You're focused in the moment. So it's about a concept of presence, but interacting and doing something. The trusted part comes in because when you're in the flow, even though until this moment, maybe you knew before a very clear definition of it before this video, you might not have had the words to describe why you're making the right choices you're making, but it feels like this sense of like, this feels like the right thing. I trust what I'm doing. I'm trusting in the universe. And because you're trusting in the process, you're building trust in yourself, how you interact with others, how you believe that the universe is not against you, but in fact really has your back and is trying to help you heal, trying to help you understand yourself, trying to help you get everything you possibly want. So the flow is magical and sweet and fun, but it is building something and it is evolving you and it is removing resistance. And I just love that. And then that brings up the equation because remember I talked about in the Akashic Records video and I think the Spiritual Upgrades video that these things, while we might just see them as a couch, on a spiritual level, you can see a mathematical formula or a geometric shape, and they can be broken down in more just words. Like there's both, again, an analytical way of breaking it down and a philosophical way of breaking it down. And that's the thing with spirituality. It is both. Things are clear-cut and very open-ended at the same time. So when I was asking, well, what is the equation for flow? Basically, my spirit guide said, we'll do it another time. We'll talk about another video because it is too big of a concept, even as an equation, because you used to be pretty surprised at the concepts I've seen, and then it's very clear cut. It's like, here's the shape, here's the geometric shape, like that explains the idea of something. But with this, it's all these different parts, and it's kind of a bouncing back from concept to concept that is within the entire equation as a whole, from things like they mentioned balance to intense analyzation. And understanding even just that that's what the equation encompasses is very telling. Again, I'm always trying to bring back the idea that everything you're experiencing is not a coincidence that it appears that way. It is both being represented physically in front of you, but it's also representing a philosophical metaphor, and even on an equation level, it is encompassing a metaphor. So it goes very deep. So when you're experiencing the world, try not to just look at something as is. understand that it is trying to express a bigger idea and break down what's the shape of it, what's the size of it, what's the purpose of it, what does that mean as the purpose of it. You see what I'm saying? That's the bigger concept with flow as a whole, is interacting with it, with the world and the universe and yourself, and putting all of these concepts together. Another thing, though, that I thought was interesting is that they didn't want to go over the equation, my spirit guide, because they said it is, like you people out there, you guys, it is the intention in life to ask these questions yourselves. I am trying to get as much information as possible, but at the end of the day, we cannot vibrate for each other. We cannot feel for each other. We cannot solve all of each other's, we're meant to do our own thing. And so these questions, you will contemplate and understand yourself and come to your own conclusions, because you have to evolve on to yourself. So sometimes things will have answers, and sometimes it is your very life purpose to discover those answers yourself. So I think that pretty much encompasses everything. The only thing I looked up is, I was like, well, how do you lose yourself from the flow? It's just like you get tripped up to thinking about it too much. If you follow a concept past the present moment into the past, if you're too planning in the future, if you're kind of judging yourself too hard, anything where it's not effortless, that makes sense, you get tripped up. And remember, if you get kind of out of the flow one second, you can pop in the next. It doesn't have to be, you will eventually find out how easy it is and be able to conquer it and kind of slip in and out of it whenever you want. So I hope I said everything. I hope you liked this. Please, if you did, consider giving the video a like, and please leave a comment in the section below. Which flow are you? I would love to genuinely know. Is there a bigger group? It would definitely give me an awareness of, I see you guys in the comments, but you can only know a person so well through one comment. I'd love to know, each little part you share, I better understand what information I can bring and offer. So yeah, and as usual, I always happily take suggestions for these videos as well. So if there's something you're particularly interested in, please let me know. Either way, I am wishing you the best. I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Me and my BFF co-host Mon say goodbye. Goodbye, guys.